A lot of times a client might come to us and say, I want to test something because they heard about it on a podcast or they were at a mastermind or something, and they heard, so-and-so said they did this thing. They changed this one thing on their page and it tripled their conversions, because everyone who goes to a mastermind tells the complete and honest truth. So just by pushing us up over 50%, it just makes the quality of every dollar you spend on ads that much more effective. If I pay $1 per click and only 40% of people watch my VSL, that means I paid more for people to not watch my VSL than to watch my VSL. But we kind of have to be the adult in the room and go, okay, let's kind of take a look at this from the perspective. You're saying changing the button text will triple the click-through rate to the order page. Really? Even seasoned operators, when they're looking at CRO and they're looking at things going wrong, they don't have a good way to prioritize what to start with. They don't really have an understanding of what's a quick win that has a big impact versus something that is like a really high lift that could have similar. And just being able to differentiate between the two helps us get to wins faster, helps us get to learnings faster.
Most of the CRO advice out there tells you to rebuild your page from scratch or redesign the hero section or just rethink the whole funnel. But that's not how we operate. When we're optimizing a landing page, there are multiple levers you can pull. We're going to focus on the 10 levers that you can pull that are the easiest lift and will give you the best boost in performance today. Hi, I'm Kira Hug, creative strategist and associate copy chief.
And I'm Sohail Chatur, performance manager here at TNT. Today on the Scaling Lab, we're sharing part 1 of our CRO Quick Wins Playbook, the 10 tests we run before we run anything else. Let's dive in.
All right, so I think before we share all 10, and by the way, this is part 1, so we're digging into 5 today, and then we'll have the next 5 in the next episode. Before we do that, I really want to talk about why this matters in the first place. And so I'd love to hear from you, Sohail, when you're talking to operators and CMOs about CRO strategy, I know you have these conversations often. Where do you feel like most of them get confused or tripped up, or maybe they're just wrong about how to approach it?
I mean, we can go in two directions there. On the one hand, it really depends on the type of the funnel. That's a little bit more nitty gritty. I think on the broad strokes, I think a lot of times, even seasoned operators, when they're looking at CRO and they're looking at things going wrong, they don't have a good way to prioritize what to start with. They don't really have an understanding of what's a quick win that's a big lift what's a quick win that has a big impact versus something that is like a really high lift that could have similar. And just being able to differentiate between the two helps us get to wins faster, helps us get to learnings faster, and helps us turn around performance.
Yeah, for sure. And when we talk about landing page too in this episode, we are talking about TSLs, PDP pages, hybrid pages. Is there anything else, Sohail, that you would add as far as what we're actually talking about today?
I would say VSL pages as well. I mean, yeah. CRO is required for every funnel out there. So regardless of what type it is, the principles around CRO are the same. It just, the tactics we employ are going to be slightly different.
Yeah. And I wonder, where do you feel like most of the operators you work with, where do they prioritize? Where does this stand as far as what's most important on their plate? From some of these business owners, founders, CMOs, where do you think CRO falls for them?
I think it's one of those things that falls somewhere behind performance creative, and it depends if they're running a VSL funnel or something else is running a VSL funnel. CRO often falls behind the actual quality of the VSL for most of them. If they're running an e-com or a PDP funnel, I think it's a little bit more top of mind because they don't have like a VSL introduces a different variable, whereas if you just have a landing page, then that is your focus. But I think for the most part, especially when working with an agency, they kind of assume that what they've got is locked down and that it's up to us to take that asset and scale it with the creative we produce.
Yeah. Definitely. And today we're mostly going to talk about the copy and any changes we can make to the copy. But of course, beyond copy, there's curation, which is almost more of resequencing the page, moving parts of it around, changing elements on the page, which is also important. And then there's also subtraction, just removing sections completely. And so we will, again, focus mostly on copy as we're talking about these levers you can pull, but there are so many other ways you can think about optimizing the page. So Sohail, when someone, a client comes to you and says, I think we should test this, how do you decide as a performance manager whether that's even worth testing? Is there a framework you use?
Yeah, I mean, the first things first is we have to look at the data. A lot of times a client might come to us and say, I want to test something because they heard about it on a podcast or they were at a mastermind or something, and they heard, so-and-so said they did this thing. They changed this one thing on their page and it tripled their conversions, because everyone who goes to a mastermind tells the complete and honest truth all the time, right? So they get excited. And it's our jobs. Now, to be fair, at TNT, we specifically work with like really high quality, very sophisticated clients. So I say this with no disrespect, but we kind of have to be the adult in the room and go, okay, let's kind of take a look at this from the perspective. You're saying changing the button text will triple the click-through rate to the order page. Really? Okay, so first is like, let's ground this into reality. And then second of all, let's kind of actually look at how many people are clicking through, and we can run that split test. It's a pretty easy split test to run. But a lot of times when a client comes to us with a suggestion, there's a lot of expectation setting, because we never want to be in a position where you're saying no to the client for any reason that's not backed up by data. But even when you're saying yes, you want to say yes with the idea that like, yes, we will test this on your behalf. But if it doesn't work, that doesn't mean anyone did anything wrong. It just might mean that we've already optimized this variable to the point where there's not much more juice left to squeeze out.
And are you using any other frameworks that help you prioritize all the tests? Especially, we're going to talk about a bunch of them today, but there's so many.
Yeah, if we already have like a whole list of things to test, and we typically use the ICE framework, impact, confidence, ease. We score everything, all three of them, on a scale of 1 to 5, and then you multiply to get the score. And from that point, that helps you really quickly prioritize. Now, obviously, ICE is a nice framework. It is also somewhat subjective because of the fact that you, as an individual, get to decide, what the score is for impact, confidence, and ease. So it's not simply, hey, plug this in and it immediately gives you. You still have to have subject matter expertise and a knowledge of like processes in order to actually use that framework effectively. Because if you don't actually know how long things take to do and how much work they take to do, then your understanding of ease can vastly vary. So it's super important to actually understand each step of the process, as well as having a framework to put it on.
Yeah, and can you just touch on those elements real quick for anyone who wants to use the ICE framework, as far as like when we're talking about impact, we're talking about this. When we're talking about ease, it's this.
Yeah, so impact, pretty straightforward. Like how much of a boost do I think this change will have on conversions, for the sake of it? Confidence is how confident I am that this particular change will have that impact. And then third is ease, is like how smooth is it for me to actually do it? So impact from 1 to 5, like 1 is lowest impact, 5 is highest impact. Confidence, same thing. 1 is lowest confidence, 5 is highest confidence. Then ease is kind of the opposite, where it's like 1 is hardest, 5 is easiest. So if you got 5 across the board, that's a score of 125. That usually means it's a really quick win. So you're looking at anything basically above a score of 100. We'll tell you that it's a quick win. That's probably what we're going to end up running through today.
Yeah, and that's a great process, just because it does force you to think more strategically about what you're doing and get multiple people to weigh in too on a team before you just do a gut check and decide, this is what's most exciting to me, or this is what I think is going to work. It's more methodical. And more of a team effort and team activity. So you're all focused on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there's always like that element of, for lack of a better word, vibes that goes into it, because if you've got a tie, you kind of have to decide. And I think that just becomes a case where being able to make the strongest case for one or the other helps. Being at an agency where we have access to reams of data across so many offers, it becomes really easy to make a case for, okay, these are both tied at 100. What should we prioritize first? Okay, well, let's look in the database and see, we've done this test 8 out of 10 times has had this impact. We've done this test and 6 out of 10 times has had that impact. Clearly, we now know, even though they're tied, test A is the way to go first, and then we can test B next. So that really helps.
Yeah. And you mentioned, gathering the data, and that's such an important part of making any of these decisions and running any of these tests. You have to know what you're testing, why, be able to back it up to other people on the team and potentially the client. So what are you looking at specifically? I know you touched on it briefly, but when you're looking at the data, like what are you talking about? What are you looking at before you make these decisions?
So I think it depends on the type of funnel we're running, because the metrics will determine like what we need to focus on. I will probably give a lot of these examples on the VSL side, but then I'll also come back with some on the PDP lander type side, just because they're two different things. But again, the principles are the same. So if I'm looking at a VSL, I'm looking at everything from the headline down. Headline's obviously not a metric, but the metrics that do matter are the play rate. So that means how many people who get to a VSL page are actually clicking to watch the VSL. There are tons of metrics within the actual video that matter. So how many people are sticking around for the first 30 seconds? How many people are sticking around for the first 10 minutes? How many people are sticking around till the product is revealed? All of those things really matter to us. Engagement on a VSL is huge for those types of funnels. And then obviously the click-through to the order form is going to be a massive thing we can choose. And then one other factor involved in there is the contribution margin. So again, if you're selling supplements specifically, whether it be through a PDP or whether it be through a VSL, typically, in 9 out of 10 cases, you're offering multiple bottle options. So it could be 1, 2, 3, it could be 1, 3, 6. Determining the contribution margin helps a lot, because all of that determines the earnings per click or revenue per visitor pick your fancy metric. And so we want to use that metric as our North Star for everything we're looking at, because we can increase conversion rate, but if that drops down AOV, average order value, too much, your RPV, revenue per visitor, is going to be significantly worse. And so that might actually not be a win. It might disguise itself as a CRO win because the conversion rate's going up, but it might actually be a net negative for the funnel. So we're always looking at it in the perspective of like, what do we specifically want to impact here? When it comes to a PDP, there's a few other things that we can look at. So again, choosing the order is one. The add to cart rate is another. Scrolls. So typically with a PDP, you've got the product at the top and then you're scrolling through sales copy, kind of similar to a TSL. So we are looking at scroll depth. We're looking at people who are like where they're going, what answers they're trying to get. You know, different heat mapping tools do different things. I really like the ones where they actually like show people highlighting specific things. That's more for like desktop experiences. So typically an older audience. But if someone's scrolling down a page and then specifically highlighting like an FAQ to read, that's kind of telling me if if out of 100 observations, like 60 people are doing that, that tells me a large percentage of the people coming here are looking for the answer to a very specific question. We should probably move that answer further up. So that's an example of things I would do on the landing page side. And then of course there's like the let's add this in, let's take this out, let's test this, let's test that, test images, all that.
Yeah, which we're going to get into. What do you think most owners might miss out on when they're looking at the data? Like you shared a lot right there, but are they just not looking at this, but they're looking at that piece? Is there a common pattern here?
I think.
Hey, just a quick interruption to remind you that there's a link in the description of this episode for you to book a free strategy call with our team of specialized experts, whether it's creative, media buying, or conversion rate optimization that is causing a bottleneck in your business right now. We'd love to help. So use that link in the description below and book your free strategy call. Now let's get back to it.
A lot of the times people look at all the sexy, easy metrics and not at the dirty underlying ones. It's kind of similar to like, if I'm going to make a really bad analogy here and we're just going to have to hope this works. If I'm driving a car and it's full, like the gas is full, and I've got all of these warning lights going on, it's very easy for me to be like, well, the car is moving and I have enough gas in the tank so I can deal with this later. Whereas our job is to go, okay, yeah, but all those warning lights are telling us there's something that needs to be fixed because this car is not going to make it to the destination. I think that actually did fine. I think we landed that pretty well.
It's like very stressful.
Yeah, well, I was building that analogy as I was driving it, no pun intended.
Okay.
So when it comes to a client, oftentimes they're looking at things like the conversion rate and the AOV and then the ROAS. Again, if that depends, if they're a VSL funnel, they're obviously a little bit more concerned about front-end ROAS. If they're a PDP client or an e-commerce client, they're a little bit less concerned about front-end ROAS and AOV. But typically conversion rate and AOV and ROAS are like the main things they're looking at. And that's great. Those are important metrics. But all they are is a lagging metric of something that's wrong. But we want to go a little bit deeper and kind of look for leading metrics to determine what we can fix and what we can address. Because they don't actually tell us, they tell us something's wrong, they don't tell us what that is. Whereas if I look at things like, okay, the conversion rate on this VSL funnel is 0.6 and we should be at like a 0.85 for our funnels to work or for our funnel economics to work. Well, then the conversion rate doesn't actually tell me what the problem is. It just tells me that there is a problem. So then I have to look at all these different things. How many people are clicking on the play rate, like on the VSL to actually play and watch it? If that rate is below a benchmark, and we have our internal benchmarks for that, if that's 20 points below, the easiest thing is let's change the thumbnail. Let's try a looping GIF. Let's try an autoplay. That's one thing we can do. If people are clicking to watch, but then they're dropping off within the first 30 seconds, then it becomes, okay, what are we doing in the first 30 seconds to lose them? And what's nice about breaking it up into those chunks is it's really manageable. You can probably isolate, if you're breaking up your viewership into 30-second chunks, it's very easy to isolate one or two lines or one or two visuals inside of that 30-second chunk of what's probably alienating a good chunk of your audience. We had a big win like this on one of our clients, which honestly I forgot about until they reminded me, where I had just done an analysis on their VSL because I was like, we looked at this VSL, we'd rewritten it together with the client. It looked so much better. But then when I did the first analysis on it, I was like, we're losing like 50% of people in the first minute where we should only be losing about 30. I was like, that's a huge jump. And that really affected all of the rest of the engagement metrics. So I flagged that with the client right away. We quickly looked at it and triaged it and went, okay, this line is actually really hurting. We thought it was going to do X. It's actually doing Y. We thought the emotional trigger would be it's an aha moment. And actually it was just making people mad and wanting to click away. So as soon as we identified that, we stripped it out. All of a sudden the play rate got back to normal. The conversion rate just spiked. So that's an example of like looking under the hood.
What was it that made people angry?
I don't.
But to talk about tools, I know you have a couple go-to tools, for someone listening who's like, okay, I do need to collect better data here to make informed decisions. What are some tools you might recommend checking out?
Well, I mean, I think we offer our full funnel analysis sheet as like something anyone can get. Kira or Eros, you guys can drop the link below or do whatever fancy video stuff you guys do to make it an interactive link. That's honestly the best thing. I've used that tool so effectively. I got here and I saw this and I was like, this is just a spreadsheet and it seems like a lot of work for no reason. And then I started actually implementing this sheet and being able to fully analyze a client's funnel purely from the data. And what's really nice about that is because I, as a creative, tend to want to look at things from a creative lens, the numbers actually tell me where to look. So I don't have to look at the whole funnel every time. The numbers just say, hey, go here, X marks the spot. And then very quickly I can diagnose what the actual issue is, which I think is like the number one tool we use. We've used it for everything from figuring out how to improve how to improve VSL performance to everything, like to improving AOV, because we're looking at upsell take rates and we're like, something's wrong here. This doesn't match our benchmarks. We can probably make this change to this funnel and get an additional $20 to our AOV, which for those listening, that's actually a pretty big jump depending on what business you're in. So that's probably number one. If you're on like the e-commerce PDP side, like you definitely need a proper heat mapping tool. If you don't have a heat mapping tool, you are leaving a lot of data on the table. And it's kind of the same thing. It just tells you where people are dropping off, what people are looking for, and then telling you the story. And heat maps are super cool because you can actually show an individual person's journey of how they buy. And then they overlay it. So they actually give you like the general, and you can also see specific.
Awesome. Those are two great resources that our community can check out. And so now that we've covered tools and the pre-work that goes into this, let's share some of these levers. Again, we'll share the first 5 in this episode, and then we'll share the next 5 in the next episode. And again, you'd want to use an ICE framework or some similar framework to figure out which ones to test first. These are not necessarily in a particular order, but we are starting with the hero section as a focus. And this first one I like because it is an easy lift. You don't have to do a ton of design work to make this implement this with your team. And this is testing sub-headline bullets in the hero section. This is a great way to test a couple specific bullets that speak to objections and hesitations right before you share a CTA in the hero section. And this is something that Colin, our creative director, talks about often, which is his kind of like go-to sequence of bullets. The first one being you share something that you can do this without. So it's without giving up the foods you love. The next line is you can do this even if you haven't exercised in years. And the third one is you can do this in just 30 minutes, 3 times a week. So the first one again, without, even if, in just, and that way you can kind of quickly speak to the different hesitations so that you can get someone to kind of pull down their guard and be more likely to opt in or scroll the page and get to the next section of the page. And again, bullets are an easy lift, so you can continue to test them if you don't want to test these hesitation, bullets that overcome objections. You could test different benefits to find out what your audience cares about the most and take it in that direction too. So pretty easy and worth adding to your list as you're thinking about what to test on your page.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything above the fold is usually prime real estate because it's the first thing people see. So that's always going to be a high impact move, almost 100% of the time. I don't know why I was like saying almost 100% of the time. Impact, like, starting with above the fold is going to be the right direction. I would jump onto that and say, I really like to test the headline. And I know you and I have different methodologies for how we test headline. You have something called gateways, right? Headline gateways.
Yeah. And so you can think about testing from different entry points. And so understanding different entry points as far as what you're trying to do. Are you introducing the product in your headline or introducing a pain point, a belief shift, or maybe your headline is identity forward? And that's all based off knowing your audience and doing the work to understand what level of awareness they have and what most of them fit into. Are they pain aware or are they in a different part of their journey where they really need to shift their belief to reframe how they're looking about the offer, thinking about the offer. So I think this goes back to just knowing your audience and how they're landing on the page, what they're thinking about, what they're wanting, what they believe.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I tend to approach it more from the perspective of like, we kind of know what headlines are working in the market and we don't obviously want to like swipe them completely, but the structure and like the beats tend to really help us determine how we want to put one together. And once we have the overall structure, it becomes very easy to test out and swap out variables until you find the right message for that audience with that existing winning structure. And then you can start iterating on top of that and, adding in bullets and other things.
Yeah. I mean, it gets overwhelming, I'd say, just in terms of there's so many headlines you could test. And I think the overwhelm is real when it comes to testing headlines, because you could lean into different promises or speak to different belief shifts. And so how do you think about it when you're initially testing headlines and you're like, I could go in 100 different directions at this point?
I mean, I think it depends on your level of scale. If you're, if you're not spending more than $30,000 a day, you can probably just find your winning headline and move on. And that's going to be pretty good
That's true.
for a large swath of your audience. But when you get into that realm of spending like, 80, 90, 100K a day or more, you're probably going to have to need individual landing pages with significantly more synergy with your actual ads and the personas you're going to talk to. So it really just depends on where you are in the cycle. If you're not spending a lot, I wouldn't spend more time than you need on it. You're right, Kira. It can become a trap of let's keep testing headlines. It's kind of the same thing in the VSL world of testing leads. At some point, you kind of got to go, okay, we've done what we can do here. We need to move on. And then you revisit when there's enough traffic to sustain multiple different tests and multiple different entry points.
Yeah, and we probably should have started with that at the beginning of the episode too, just as far as like when this type of CRO testing makes sense. So can you just even share that again one more time? I think that's really important to say, like, maybe this isn't a focus for you right now. You should focus elsewhere and you shouldn't be testing multiple elements of the landing page.
Yeah. And it also really depends on like what you're working with today, right? Like, I mean, if you have a really, really poor converting landing page, then the headline's not going to fix it unless the headline is go away. We don't want your money. Like if you fix it to something else, yeah, you might get a big bump. But for the most part, your headline is kind of like, hey, let me get a couple of points here, not let me go from 0.2% to 0.5%. Like that's not going to be a headline test. That's going to be hey, there's something fundamentally wrong with your page and you need to figure out what that is. So it really depends on where you are. And a lot of this comes down to like benchmarks. Like a really easy one is like 1%. You can always aim for 1% as a North Star. It's actually a little bit low for a PDP funnel, but like at least the starting point. For a VSL funnel, it's relatively high. So like 1% is just a good number, especially if you're driving cold traffic. So if you want to use that as a very generic North Star, it's a good one. And then you have to look at how far you are from the goal. If you're at 0.91, then yeah, start testing headlines. You might be able to get those little bit of bumps. But if you're at 0.2, like you have bigger work to do. It means your design's wrong. Your funnel might be broken. Do all the buttons work? Are you making, like, is your copy just bad? Like those are big things. Or are you just like, is your message to market match just so far off that you need to fix things? But yeah, it really depends on where you are and how close you are to the goal.
Yeah, that's so important. And entirely different conversation at that point. If you're so far off the goal, that would be a different episode we could put together.
Yeah.
Not this one today.
Yeah, that's less CRO and that's more like triage.
Right.
Surgery, open heart surgery for your landing page.
Which we could cover.
We can.
Not today though. So next lever is CTA button, again, in the hero section. We're focused on the hero section right now. So I am curious to hear your approach and how you think about this CTA button copy. We're not talking about testing colors at this point. Like that is all possible too, and that can make a difference. Colors matter, visuals matter. But as far as just the copy, the text on the button, how do you approach it so that it's an effective test?
I think it's a really low impact test, but it's one thing. So I wouldn't prioritize it, but it is something that you can start testing when you're kind of like scraping the bottom of the barrel. So like it is perfectly fine to go out the gate with, place your order here or join now or register here or join for free. Like those are fine. They're generic. They're not special, but they're fine. But then when you get to the point where you're like, again, I've done all these other tests. I've made all of these other optimizations. I still think there's more juice to squeeze. That's when you go, okay, can I tailor every CTA button along this page to what the message was before it? And that's a really good way to just like get yourself a little bit of an extra bump. But again, it doesn't fix like a lot of the fundamentals. It really is like a cherry on top. So in terms of prioritizations, I'd probably put it really low because it's not going to, the best impact it'll have is once the rest of your funnel is optimized. It's not going to have a really good impact at the beginning. Because if no one's reading the stuff before the CTA button, they're not clicking on the button regardless.
Yeah, I think.
Hey, just wanted to pop in for a quick break and let you know that if you're interested in signing up for our newsletter because you're enjoying the insights here and you want to get weekly insights directly to your inbox from our team of specialized experts, go ahead and use the link in the description to sign up for our newsletter, Scaling Secrets. And with no further ado, let's get back to the episode.
That's really fair. I think this is a lever that you can pull that's just not as critical, but we could say maybe just the placement of the button as far as like if you are missing it in your hero section, like make sure you get it in there. But yeah, the language less critical at this point, maybe worthwhile for testing just to understand a little bit more about your buyer, because you can test different short promises as like micro copy on the button to understand a little bit more about what drives this buyer to even click. If you have different short promises, you may find out something new about your audience that you didn't know, and that could help you create other tests and change your messaging elsewhere on the page. So you can think about just each test informing other decisions that you make and having some learning element involved. Otherwise, it's just a waste.
Yeah, I agree entirely. It's kind of like there's a lot of these. I mean, I think you call them bonus levers, where there are all these things like right towards the end that you're like, hey, I hadn't thought about this, but it actually might make a huge difference. A really good one that everyone seems to gloss over is the actual image in your hero page.
Yeah.
For some reason, people always get stuck with the first one that they use and then never actually change it. We had a fitness client that was like that. It was an offer for like 40, 50-year-old women, but the couple was like this dude and his like hot 22-year-old girlfriend, like Zoolander posing to the camera, like very like blue steel type thing.
I know what you're talking about.
Yes, you do, because we both worked on that funnel.
Yes.
That was an example of like a huge demographic mismatch where like you put a woman who matches the audience. Like, yeah, there's a little bit of aspirational stuff, right? So I'm not going to say this is like one-to-one always works. It really does come down to the psychology of the majority of your buyer. Some of them are going to want that aspirational. They want to look like they did in their 20s. And so they'd actually rather see a 22-year-old woman. Some of them are going to want to see themselves better. And so understanding the psychology of your buyer is really important. This actually gives you a huge insight. If you go, do they want the demographic match, or do they want the idealized version of how they saw themselves back then? Because a lot of people looking backwards see themselves in a much more favorable light than what it actually was. So it really depends. And that actually gives you a lot of insight, just that one image, into other parts of your buyer's psyche that can then inform different parts of your funnel. And so it's a kind of a bonus lever in that, like, on the surface, it probably isn't that impactful, but the insights you get from it can inform a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, especially with this hero image. It's just, I think it's such an easy test and something that you can continually learn more about your audience. And if you find out that your audience does prefer that younger aspirational image that's like 20 years younger, that may be helpful to know as you build out the rest of the page too. That, okay, we're going to go a little bit younger, maybe more of this style. Maybe that can inform B-roll in your VSL too, and then inform the ads, the type of talent you're working with, or the spokespeople who are in your ads. So it's one image on the page, but it can inform everything else you're doing and a lot of other decisions you're making elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, brands often tend to build their hero image around the client they wish, or the customer they wish they were selling to, not the customer they're actually selling to. And so a lot of the times that initial image is actually more of a reflection of the owner or the founder than it is of the actual customer. And so you might have to be careful because like they have their own biases. So it coming from an agency perspective, you really have to massage that messaging a little bit, but you want to make sure that, you're taking their ego out of it and their perception of who they're selling to out of it, and really just talk to the actual audience.
Yeah. And I know we're talking about VSLs right now, text sales letters, PDPs, hybrids right now. But, when would you start to think about maybe adding some other elements to the hero section? Maybe it's not the person anymore. It is the hero image of the bottle, or it could be something else. When do you start to think outside of the person?
I think it goes to the customer journey. Like, you probably shouldn't be sending bottom of funnel traffic and top of funnel traffic to the same page. It just doesn't really make sense to do that. The top of the funnel, those people that you're sending to a page need to do a lot more information to be significantly more aware of what your product is and what solution you provide and how it differs from other things in the market. If they still haven't bought, then you don't want to send them back to that page. If you're bringing them back, you want to bring them further down. So then it might be more about the benefits of the product. It might be about, the discount you're offering. So at that point, like, you are probably like splitting pages and like diverting traffic to different things. Except, of course, there is the one case, because I've done this with other e-com funnels before, where if the product requires a demonstration, so it's not necessarily a supplement, it's like what's an example? Like
a kitchen appliance?
Yeah, like a kitchen appliance where you actually want to see people, like, everyone loves the sexy shot of like the frying pan in slow motion with the egg flipping up in the air, right? Like, you want that demonstration. That's when you would put the hero product. But for most of what we sell, just in general, because they're supplements, it's more about showing the person the idealized version of themselves that they get as a result of taking the solution. Now, sometimes you want to show them the pain, sometimes you want to show them the pleasure. So again, it really depends on where they are in the funnel, where they are in that stage of awareness.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that covers the levers that are above the fold, hero section focused. I mean, there are more we could even talk about again if we wanted to get into like color theory and just layout and design.
I mean,
But
you're
next,
carrying the podcast on your own if we're talking about color theory.
I want to have a whole episode dedicated to color theory. So
I will listen to it.
we'll add that to
I
the
will
list.
contribute no value to that.
My goodness. Anyway, we're going to move to below the fold with the next two levers. And so I am curious about your thoughts about this one. And basically the subheadline below the hero section, oftentimes this feels very fluffy and just like filler and doesn't feel like we're using this real estate properly to do a job and to have a purpose. What do you see? What mistakes do you see with this headline? Or maybe it's not even a headline. Maybe something else is happening there. Other mistakes.
I mean, I think you just said it. I think a lot of marketers treat it like fluff, like it's filler. Like, oh, okay, we had the above the fold. We need something to demarcate that, oh, now you're getting into sales copy. So here's just a subhead to show, hey, there's some stuff below this that's important.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing as like, what do we always say about email, right? Or what do marketers always say about email, right? The subject line gets the open, the email gets the click. The click is, you're not supposed to sell within the email.
True.
It's just every step needs to lead to the next step. And that's the exact same thing. The headline is supposed to make you read what's below the headline. The subhead is supposed to make you read what's below the subhead. So every line is supposed to push you further and further down until you're ready to make that buying decision. So and keep in mind, like after the above the fold section, as soon as you go below, that's like the next biggest thing people are going to read. If you neglect that, if you choose to just treat it as just like a line that says, hey, here's more things I'm going to say to you so you buy, you're going to alienate people right there. That's a huge opportunity to either make a big promise or expand upon the big promise you made in the headline. It also lets you set the direction of the sales conversation, whether or not you're going to lead into a story as one type of opening, or whether you're going to lead into like a problem solution origin story from the other side. Like that one sub headline gives you so many options. Why would you just waste it on like, insert placeholder here?
Yeah. And if you are reading through that subheadline copy and it could appear on any other page, any other competitor's page, then it probably is not doing a good enough job of building upon a promise or speaking to a different benefit or providing social proof or whatever it is for your unique offer. It really needs to do the heavy lifting. And I like the way that you put it, like it needs to buy more time. If we just bought some scroll from the hero section, now let's buy some more time from this busy person who landed on this page so that they're willing to give us a couple more seconds and then let's get them down the page.
Yeah, why would you waste it? You just bought all that goodwill. Like someone just gave you another chance to sell them. Why would you like throw that away?
So when in doubt, we're saying test a promise, expanding upon the promise you had in the hero section. Maybe it's a different promise. Maybe it's a different benefit. Maybe there's a hesitation or objection that you want to speak to that you didn't address in the hero section, or social proof that you didn't include in the hero section that's important to keep people interested and engaged.
Yeah. Or use it to tell the reader why they need to read that next paragraph. So you can telegraph up or you can telegraph down, but you got to telegraph something.
All right. So for our fifth lever, let's talk about VSLs. I know we've been bouncing around between PDP pages and VSLs, TSLs, but let's focus on VSLs for this one. And what is a lever that is worthwhile pulling for VSL pages?
So I think I kind of alluded to it a few times on this call already. I think a lever I really like to pull when it comes to VSLs is the thumbnail, because the play rate of the VSL matters so much. It's the equivalent of the engagement rate on a video ad. The more people you can get to start watching, the more people will continue watching, the more people will then take the desired action you have, right? We don't actually want people to watch. We want people to watch and then buy. And so the more people who watch, the more people buy. It's just very logical math. So I'm really big on getting the most amount of people to watch. I want, at least 65% of people who land on the page to actually click that big play button. One, because it means we're getting their attention, and two, it means we're getting the right people on the page. If we're getting, 30% of people coming to the page and clicking through, it means 70% of people are the wrong people. You're going to have a few people who are like, I don't want to watch a VSL right now. I'm going to dip off. But if it's, a significant majority of your traffic, it means you're getting the wrong traffic, or it means your thumbnail's really bad. And the only way to tell is actually test your thumbnail. And so I really like the idea. And like, you can do this really simply. Like you can start with a static thumbnail. That's a really easy thing to do, which is just like a nice image, kind of like the equivalent of a YouTube thumbnail. Like all the best YouTubers in the world test hundreds of thumbnails to see what the best click-through rate is. There's no reason you shouldn't be doing something similar for your VSL. Now, I'm not suggesting test 100, but at least test a couple. Second to that is that pretty much every video replay tool out there, so Wistia, Vidalytics, any of the others, will give you the ability to autoplay sections of your VSL to make it look like it's already started. Now I don't necessarily think it's a bait and switch, but it's kind of a way to get a little bit more engagement is when you show people, hey, like the video's already started, like click here. And of course, then it'll start from the beginning. You can also like create a looping GIF of a specific part of your VSL, or you can actually create a separate looping GIF using just like a video editor. We've actually found a lot of success using all 4 of those for different clients. And sometimes actually just a really standard, it's not even a looping GIF. It's just like a really simple image of like the hero or the expert standing in front of some kind of setting with arrows pointing at different things, just to make it look a little bit dynamic and create curiosity, gets a really high play rate. But you have to play around with it. And it, again, all of this depends on the psyche of your audience. How sophisticated are they? How aware of the problem are they? What information are they trying to gather, or what solution or what problem are they trying to solve when they hit your page? And then kind of work from there to determine how to get those people to then take the next step to get what they're looking for, which is to click that video, click the play button and watch it.
So where do we frequently mess this up? Is it just that we aren't creating any thumbnail, or it's just we aren't testing it often enough?
I mean, oftentimes you just upload the video to Wistia or Vitalytics and it just like spits out, like it just picks a random frame and they just start with that. And it's just super inefficient and ineffective, where like that could get you maybe like a 40% play rate, but then like even just doing a bare minimum, like either a good static image or like a very simple looping GIF. And like, I hope this podcast does not go viral, because then all the comments are just people saying it's pronounced GIF. But regardless, that can easily get you into like above 50% play rate, just with a good static image or like a quick looping GIF. So it's like, it's a really easy way to get, you're paying for that traffic, right? So if I pay, for easy math, if I pay $1 per click and only 40% of people watch my VSL, that means I paid more for people to not watch my VSL than to watch my VSL. Mm-hmm. So just by pushing us up over 50%, it just makes the quality of every dollar you spend on ads that much more effective.
I also say GIF.
Well, good. So this is why we get along.
This is why. Okay, so we covered a lot with these 5 levers. So just a quick recap. Number 1 lever was the bullets in the hero section. And being really strategic about how you want to test those. Number 2 was the headline doorway test, where you're testing based off the level of awareness of your audience. Number 3 was the hero CTA button, which is a great way to test when the page is already performing, and you can use that test to learn more about your customer and how they view themselves and what is driving them to move forward in the funnel. Number 4 is the subheadline below the fold, where we often just aren't using it wisely or strategically, and it feels a little bit fluffy and it's not actually giving people a reason to continue scrolling. And then the fifth one is the VSL thumbnail, which is another great lever you can pull on those VSL pages. So if someone listening is like, cool, those are great, but I can't do all of that immediately, what, Sohail, would you recommend they focus on first, knowing that this is not one size fits all?
I think if it's like a landing page, like a TSL or a PDP, probably the bonus lever, which is the hero image, just because it'll probably give you it'll likely give you a lot of insights on the user's demographic. And if it's a VSL, it's definitely the thumbnail.
Yeah, I love the bonus hero image test. I think that's a great one. Okay, and we covered a lot, and we did go a little bit deeper talking about why this is important and the pre-work as well. But like, what mindset shift do you hope listeners come away with from this episode, if they have one?
I hope they all start saying GIF instead of GIF. It's like saying I ran away from a grizzly bear. It's a grizzly bear. Like, what the hell? No, that is the one thing I want people to come away with on this episode.
Great. That is great. Okay. Anything else beyond that?
I think you just need to, probably the ICE framework, because look, you can have all of the tactics and the different levers to pull, but if you don't know which order to pull them in, like, you're not going to do damage by pulling them in the wrong order, but you're not going to help yourself if you pull them in the wrong order. Because again, going back to what I said earlier about like the CTA button, if you're testing that first, but most people aren't even like engaging past the headline on your page, then it doesn't matter how much work you do with the CTA buttons. And it also doesn't actually tell you if what you did was effective, because you're not getting data. You're not getting any people to actually click the buttons to begin with. So it really is important to figure out the order in which you do these tests. And so that's why I think the ICE framework is really useful.
Yeah, that's a great callback to that framework. And, if you're listening and you got anything out of this episode, please do us a favor, and you can subscribe wherever you're listening. So if you're on YouTube, you can hit subscribe, and check us out on YouTube, because oftentimes we are showing examples of what we're talking about, visuals from the CRO examples that we're talking about today that you can't listen to on Spotify necessarily. We are also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other podcast player, mostly all of them, not quite all of them. So you can hit follow on any of those podcast players because part 2 is coming up soon and you don't want to miss it.
Thanks, everybody.